Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. The centre and states decided on Sunday to lower rates on 66 goods and services, from pickles and cheaper cinema tickets to insulin and instant food mixes, and also ease the compliance burden for small businesses as they race to be ready to launch the goods and services tax from July 1st. The GST Council, which met on Sunday, reduced the rates of nearly half the 133 items on which representations had been received, which include hybrid cars, sanitary napkins, telephone bills and chips manufactured in the country. Over the last 3 weeks, the council, comprising the union and state finance ministers, had decided the rates for 1,211 goods and around 500 services and had been flooded with requests for revision. All goods and services have been put into 4 tax slabs of 5, 12, 18 and 28%, in addition to several mass consumption items that will attract zero tax. With barely 3 weeks to go for the GST to kick in, we will take stock of how ready we are to bring in the new indirect tax regime. Joining me on the program today are Arbind, Prasad, former Director General FICCI; Nitin, Desai, former Chief Economic Advisor, Government of India; Ajay, former Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry; and Priya, Ranjan, senior journalist. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Mr. Prasad, I'd like to begin with you. Of course, are we set to bring in GST? How prepared are we?
Well, from the industrial or business perspective, when it impacts more than 1 million business entity, obviously some are better prepared than others. But even those who are most prepared, I would say they are prepared to face challenges. It will be very difficult to say that they will face no challenges, because the scale of operation is really very big, and ultimately it will also depend how fast is our network, GSTN network, IT network, because whole operation is dependent on success and speed, stability and security of that network. And that will be really tested only when people actually start using that network. So I would say that since the GSTN has been under discussion for a long time, some business industry are prepared, but on the other hand, there are others who somehow are waiting for the D-Day to come. But sure, in any case, I would expect the government that if postponing is not the practical solution, then at least for the few months, it should be of a trial period or transition period, essentially meaning by that when it comes to enforcement of legal provisions, penal provisions or timelines, the government should be little sympathetic and should be watchful how it goes and should tweak the timeline accordingly.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Desai, do you subscribe to the views of Mr. Prasad, trial and error method, at least for now? I think we are beyond that stage now, aren't we?
And I think obviously the press has been full of a lot of this nervousness. I call it, prenuptial nervousness. So Mr. Arun Jaitley must become like one of these hakims who reassures grooms that your wedding night is going to be all right. You see, that is part of it. Is just, it's a huge change, and this is going to take little time. Part of the problem has been created because of the weaknesses in the structure of the GST, which we have talked about frequently in this program. The multiple rates, which has led to these sorts of delays, like rates not being announced a few weeks before because there are representations. If there had been fewer rates, just a central rate with a few exceptions, the scope for this would have been less. But anyhow, all this is. There are questions about the robustness of the internet network. There are questions about one very key part, the e-way bill, and whether that will be ready in time to allow seamless movement of goods. I just want to say that there are many other things, details which should be talked about. The one thing I would like to increasingly emphasize is that we are ending up with a tax system which is going to be heavily dependent on the internet, because you'll be loading up transactions all the time.
Right.
And in fact, your entire indirect taxes will depend on the robustness and the safety and security of this network. I would hope that enough effort is going into maintaining that security, because this is a huge network into which millions will be feeding information and therefore will be vulnerable to any sort of attack. And I hope that the government is devoting enough attention, because the last thing we want when we doing this is a breakdown. in
Yes.
the internet, the GSTN system. That is very, very important that the government takes
Sure.
care. Finally, on what Mr. Arbind Prasad saying, again, I quite agree. Please do not be over, sort of enthusiastic about implementing the penal provisions in the first 3 to 6 months. Please treat it. It can't be a transition period because the old tax is gone.
Yes.
So you will have to collect only this tax. There's nothing else you can collect.
There's nothing else that you can do now.
Nothing else you can do. But be a little more sort of relaxed about the penal
Sure.
provisions.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Dua, are you happy with the way things have taken shape thus far?
I'm actually very happy that we have reached this stage. Let's look at where we were 6 months ago or 5 months ago, early this year. And on this very program, there have been doubts raised whether there would be a consensus amongst the states, have the constitutional amendment in position and the subsequent laws. As of now, 25 states have also passed the SGST. Central Parliament has done its work on IGST, UTGST, and the SGST portion which they were concerned with. So the first thing is that between now and the 1st of July, 4 states have yet to get on board. And you can't have a GST which does not apply across the country, otherwise we're not going to get advantages. But I draw solace from what Professor Amit or Dr. Amit Mitra said yesterday, that we will also fall in. We don't want to be left out. If we are not able to convene a legislative session, then we might even consider the ordinance route in Bengal to have it passed. So which does show that there could be, and then 3 other states, including I think Tamil Nadu, have yet to get on board in doing that. That's number one. Second is a little bit of complacency arising partly because of uncertainty, saying I don't have much work to do, so how do I feed, what are the rates, what are the regulations into the GST network till the council does it. So we are at a stage where the head of the GSTN is on record as of a day before the council met yesterday, saying I have 50 days still left before my system needs to be ready. He is taking 1st of August, not 1st of July of the day.
July, yes.
Because then he takes 1st of August because he says the return is to be filed on 1st of August. But what happened to the millions of invoices which also have to be loaded for a return to come in, and the first date for loading of the invoice now is 15th of July. So actually, some invoices actually can start from very first day itself. So I wouldn't call it complacency, probably it's a wrong word which I've used, that there is an uncertainty caused by delay in the what was referred to earlier, that a lot of decisions have been taken. Very recently, they have to be turned into rules and regulations, and thereafter, we have to really create the network. On top of it is now to assist the network. GSPs have been provided, that is the GST Suvidha providers. 34 of them have been approved by the GST network, but many more are required. And the interface between the Suvidha providers and the network, that will take time as per the Suvidha providers themselves.
Indeed.
And this is something which the GST network authorities also commented, though they are saying everybody doesn't necessarily have to come through the Suvidha providers. You come from, otherwise also you can get to the network. Finally, I would say is a basic issue that if 60 million traders are there in the country, and that's what the Confederation of Traders Associations say, that we have that many members. A lot of these happen to be in rural areas who have never filed a return.
Yes.
And now we are saying not only, and even if they fell under VAT, the VAT required them to file a return once a quarter. Now they are going to be required to file 3 returns a month, on the 10th of every month, 20th of every month, and 30th of every month. All right, fear, awareness, whatever you might say, that they fall in line. But do they have the wherewithal to send that information? The information has to be no longer, it can be saying, I'll send it in writing. It has to be on the network.
Yes.
Which presumes that internet is available all over the country,
Sure.
including in the rural areas where today it's a major, I think, deficiency.
You know, there are several challenges. Remains to be seen how
right.
this is worked out and how things fall in place. But I guess in due course of time, we'll know exactly what these challenges are and how we can deal with them.
Frank, certainly I totally agree that it's desirable. Unless we, as I say, jump into the water, how will you learn how to swim?
Sure.
But the fact of the matter is there is one hell of a lot of work to be done
Indeed,
between now.
There's no denying or there's no doubting that at all. Absolutely, yes.
And there the appeal of the Confederation of these Traders to the Prime Minister is, while we are on board with you, we are willing to come on board from the first.
It's justified.
There a lot of things have to be done.
Sure.
And please give us, they've requested for a 9-month grace period within which, other than their attempt to, pay the taxes,
Sure.
that could be prosecutable, if that's the right word.
Indeed.
But all others, they have said, take it easy on us.
Fair enough. Mr. Dash, one disruptive measure in November with demonetization, another disruptive measure, if you could call it that, in on July 1st, 2017. Can the economy handle two such things, two such disruptive measures in the span of less than 1 year?
No, this
What
is
kind of an impact is it going to have on the economy?
GST is constructive, destructive. So disruptive measure. GST is not disruptive to the economy. In fact, the economy required it to have been done 10 years ago. But as I see it, GST is supposed to bring about transparency, simplicity, and honesty of the tax system. Now, the challenge now is that even before GST is implemented, since it's going to the where, because I think you still have in the next 3 weeks you will have 2 meetings of the GST Council to finalize the last mile certain issues that are still left to be covered. Now, since it will be to the where, what you require now is that a change of mindset, even before GST has been rolled out or is implemented. So you require people to have, in anticipation of the introduction of GST, for it to be a smooth process, you require certain amount of transparency, honesty in the mindset. That mindset change must come. Otherwise, what is, for instance, what is being asked for by the industry, and legitimately so, that enforcement should be a little relaxed in the initial period, considering that things will be, there will be teething problems and things. So that has to be a two-way process, because as we know that it has GST as a disruptive process will have implications for the consumers and for the economy in general.
Sure.
And at this stage, you cannot afford inflation to be triggered.
Indeed.
And the rate structures, etc., which is now final, jury is out on that as to when GST is actually implemented, what will be the fallout of GST.
So I think Mr. Dua wants to make a point as well.
And
all that I wanted to add to what Ranjan is saying is, I can understand the small industries, small businesses, rural businesses not being ready for it. What surprised me most was a representation reportedly of the Bankers Association, Indian Bankers Association, before the Standing Committee on Finance, Parliamentary Committee,
yes,
that banks are not ready. So meaning an organized sector in the country saying we are not ready for GST, and then Railways, our so-called largest employer in the country. The Railways has now suddenly, after everything has been done, are saying we need to be exempted for movement of what is internal to us, our goods, railway components, railway hardware which moves, etc. That should not be covered by this. Meaning something which has been talked of for so long, you Jollywell needed to be up to date
yes,
with
yes,
that.
indeed,
And then
sure.
suddenly now it said that the railways will be required. I think it was obvious. Every passenger ticket sold is an invoice. So railways will have to now, last year they had 8,200 million passengers.
Sure.
So that kind of
That many
invoices come in.
Yes, Mr. Desai.
No, I think this scale, I think that
Yeah.
the scale of the effort involved in terms of the data management, etc., is huge.
Yeah.
Even otherwise, besides this, you are looking at up to between 1 and 2 crore invoices being uploaded every day. I would say, let us ask ourselves, where are the judders most likely to come from, which the government should anticipate? One of the judders is clearly going to be incompleteness of some things like e-way bills. The other judder I definitely expect will be from the internet side, the loading up. We are talking in terms of asking rural traders to load it 3 times a month. I've just come from the hills of UP. I can tell you one thing, that if I looked at the broadband connectivity and the power supply that was available there in Mukteshwar, where I was, I cannot see how this can be done. How can you have the same rule for some shopkeeper sitting up there in Mukteshwar, who gets power supply 4 or 5 hours a week, who has very poor broadband connectivity, with the same rule being applied to somebody sitting in Delhi?
Sure.
Some little bit of intelligence will have to be exercised for doing that. The third area of trouble that I expect is this application of the no profiteering rule.
Yes.
You know, that is going to lead to a lot of, because remember this, there'll be many complaints from consumers because of the sticker shock.
Yeah.
Now that the excise will also be shown as part of the rate, you'll see a sticker shock. And on services, also you'll see a big sticker shock. So there will be many complaints of profiteering from the consumer end. And then you have this no profiteering body, which will have to investigate this. So I would say that the 3 areas of difficulty that I expect will be the e-way bill side, which will clog up the movement of goods across the country, the internet-based information processing side, which the scale is just enormous,
Yes.
which is going to face judders. And the third area of difficulties that I expect in the first few months will be from the no profiteering thing.
Indeed.
So I think we should be ready for this. Overall impact on the economy, we must be realistic. Businesses will be so busy coping with the change that you are not going to see
There will
that.
be a negative impact.
Well, I would say there will definitely be, you have to wait at least 2 quarters for things to stabilize. And
Positive
normal
impact.
economic, I suspect that for the next, immediately after 1st July, most top managements in many companies will just be coping with the inelasticities which will have emerged.
So there's going to be a lot of confusion initially, couple of quarters for things to settle down is what
Absolutely.
you're
In fact, some
saying.
people are saying it could be longer.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Prasad, as far as the industry is concerned, we've spoken about, our panelists here have spoken about several challenges as far as the GST is concerned. As far as the industry is concerned, what do you believe is going to be the biggest challenge?
Well, all those challenges which the experts, Mr. Dua, Mr. Desai have mentioned, will ultimately impact the industry. Because if the returns are not filed and they don't get refund on time, so one, the process itself will consume so much time, as other panelists have pointed out. On the other hand, if the system takes a lot of time or does not work properly and the industry business do not get their refund on time,
Yes.
personally affected, and that will seriously impact the business. And addition to what Mr. Desai has repeatedly said, that e-way bill, essentially which requires that it can be inspected, the goods cannot move without the e-way bill. So that will create a lot of disruption in the movement and ultimately in the business and industry. So besides the challenges of implementation itself, which will require a lot of energy, time of the higher management, accounting system, the difficulty of the network and all that, these two, one, the management of cash flow in the beginning, if the system does not work properly, and the second, movement of goods will be very challenging and may impact the business and the growth itself.
Sure. Okay. Mr. Dash, as far as the GST is concerned, we've spoken about, what are the short-term challenges and, how long it might take for it to really kick in and see the benefits of it. What are the long-term benefits as far as the GST is concerned, and when can we see these benefits really?
Well, the long-term benefits are obvious because, first of all, it gets you a truly common Indian market. So, and goods and services move seamlessly. And number two is that it's a radically different tax system, more efficient, transparent, and the way we are implementing GST, it's not as simple as it was initially envisaged, but it will still be a better, simpler system. And it is IT based, and so it's transparent. It's a value-added tax. It's at the consumer end. So clearly, the long-term benefits are higher consumption, increase in production, and increased investment and higher economic growth. Now, that has, several estimates have been made as to in the long how GST will add to the growth rate of the economy. But there is no confusion that it will be an addition. So and it will be a substantial addition. So that way the benefits are very clear, and it's now been done all over the world. India, we are late in doing it, and we have now gone into it. However, it may not be the framework now being introduced may not be what was originally envisaged,
right?
And which in future have to be, on implementation. The problem areas needs to be looked at, and you need to obviously reform the GST system.
Indeed.
So in itself, it's not the end of it. It has to be a process, but it's a definitely a far better tax system that
Sure.
should give you benefit.
So
What I was saying is, in the initial phase, it's very important that this new tax system is not discredited, because if it really affects the common people, or even in the initial stage of implementation, I'm afraid that there will be social cost of to it, and there could be political resistance to this new system.
Indeed.
Which will not be in anybody's interest.
Sure.
So it's very important that all the players who involved in this, they must it must be taken up as a national movement.
Okay.
And you have to, and that's very important in the initial stages, because one is not really expecting things to be very smooth.
Sure.
Because of the sheer volume of things that are involved.
Right. It's that time of the program now where I get closing comments from all my guests. Mr. Dua?
I think the biggest benefit is that the cascading effect. There is tax upon tax, the ultimately making things costlier, and that is to go away from the GST. That's the biggest, I think, the concept of it. However, that is going to require everybody doing his bit, and where the constraint arises is what we have discussed. I would just add to it the low level of literacy in India. And after agriculture, the biggest employment sector is the retail sector in the country, admittedly.
Yes.
And this lack of education,
It's
general
going to be a
education,
stumbling block.
and within that lack of knowledge about computers, networks, that kind of knowledge, it will take time to have the full benefit achieved, and that is when
So much more than 2 quarters is what you're saying.
absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, I get reminded of some analyst today who said who's already said that Q1 2018
Okay.
is the first time that you might start seeing that this is well worth it. And he's again quoted what I'm prone to say that repeatedly, that the global experience is that the initial first year, the GST even with higher levels of
Right.
education, higher levels of internet penetration, GST,
Sure.
all that infrastructure in position, the tax has been inflationary, and the introducers, political authorities have paid for their political price for introducing it, though it was a good measure, ultimately it proved to be.
Will the BJP pay a political price or not? Time will tell.
Yes, sir.
But Mr. Desai, your closing
I
comments.
would say that it is a huge change. The last mile of transactions in India between the wholesaler and the retailer, particularly the small retailer, has been largely cash-based, and a lot of it outside the tax net. The impact of this down the line will be the formalization of this. And the formalization of payment systems, etc. I'm really shocked that the banks say they're not ready for it.
Yes.
Because the key part of this is the formalization of the payment system.
Indeed.
So I would say that somebody should really use the stick with the bank, saying you have no business to say this, because you're a key part of
Sure.
this part. So I think down the line you'll have a huge gain because of a national market, because of formalization of payments, the built-in provisions for compliance, and I think once it will be a much smoother system than the present one. And down the line, I hope also there has more simplification of rates. that we
Everything
hope
will
to
fall
see.
in place.
That things will fall in place.
Sure.
But be ready for some trouble, minimum two quarters, possibly longer.
Sure. Okay,
possibly
fair
up to a year.
Mr. Prasad, your concluding remarks on the program.
Well, Mr. Desai has already pointed out some of the defects in the structure, but more the structure is now given. So it also depends how it is implemented. One of the premise of GST was that the free flow of goods from one state to another, because the physical inspection will not be done. Any tax evasion will be checked by checking the supplier and demand side. But it appears that e-way bill may give some authority for different states to inspect. Now,
Right.
how that the authority or power is used, that will also in some way actually diminish or enhance the benefit of GST. So large benefits, the benefits we expected will also very much depend how the state government, different implementing agencies
Indeed.
take this GST in the right approach or right sense.
Sure. Mr. Dash, close the show for us with your quick concluding remark.
I would say that it's a dream that's coming true, and it's a historic event. That is so. You need once the country as a whole, nation to rise to this occasion. That is as important as that, I would say, because as we've been discussing, there are difficulties which are anticipated, and the response to that, be they the banks or the railways, all the players, they have to, we have to as a country make this a success.
Sure.
And not allow, even in the initial stage, the kind of difficulties that have been anticipated.
Okay. On that note, I'll have you want to say something, Mr. Desai?
Nothing. That's just simply, Mr. Dash is very ambitious, but I've never known any condition in which the people who pay taxes actually cooperate in paying taxes. So let's be realistic also there.
Yeah.
Indeed. All right. On that note, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Arbind, Prasad, Nitin, Desai, Ajay, Dua, Priya, Ranjan, Dash. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have. See you again next time.